Knowledge is Power is where you come to hear people's life experiences to learn from. So, without further ado, let's roll the intro.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
I have a dream. Will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Hello and welcome back to the Knowledge is Power podcast. This is your host, Max Willett. And for me, this has been greatly anticipated, and I'm very excited to have this conversation. So if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
My name is Nathan Clarke with Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty.
Well, thank you for coming on, Nathan. Nathan has the largest brokerage in the state of Rhode Island.
Number one team around since 2008. So I wouldn't say the largest. We're kind of, I always say, is like the Navy SEALs of the Navy. So we're not trying to build the Navy here. It's the Navy SEALs.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you guys listening to the podcast know that I've been in real estate for about a year now. Absolutely love it. It's a great industry, and it's changing a lot. And we're going to get into that later on in the podcast. But for now, let's talk all about you, Nathan. Let's talk about your story and how you got to this current point in your life. And you can get as deep and as detailed as you want. Don't ever feel like you're rambling on. Just go ahead and let's hear your story.
Yeah, well, Max, thank you for having me on. I know you called me. You kind of going back and forth with my assistant and trying to set something up with us. And, I appreciate you coming by. And
I appreciate you calling me and setting up a time so quickly. I mean, you just called me on Thursday.
Yeah, we're out here pretty quick. I said, hey, let's do this. I got an event going on next week, and I can kind of plug that if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Going to go over a lot of the commission changes. I'm sure we'll talk about that today. Mm-hmm. But Dan Balkin and I set up an event. It's going to be at the Crown Plaza next Monday, November 13th, 3:30. So if anybody wants to attend that, we'll be going over a lot more detail of the commission changes coming out there. Then go to realtortraining.net to sign up. I think the tickets are $49. About 3 hours. My friend Kyle Sabuth will be there. It is not a boxing event as much as we tried to make it look like that. We're just having some fun, but a lot of cool changes out there. And as you said, I've always tried to be a visionary in real estate, or I see myself as a visionary of seeing where things are going, and we've been talking about these things for quite some bit. So now my story in real estate, as you asked, Max, is I got into the real estate. I was a young man like you. I was about 20 years old. I lived in an apartment of my parents above their garage. And I was able to really start in real estate and figure things out. My father was my mentor. My father did it for 30 years at that time when I got in there. And it was kind of funny. I never thought I'd get into real estate. It was really the last industry that I wanted to get into. But like most people, you try a bunch of other things and everything else fails, and then you find yourself in real estate.
Yeah.
And so,
you're not the first person to tell me that.
That's how most of us got in here. But my biggest thing was really looking at, I got in the industry and it was like told to go sell real estate. And I was like, how? And it was like, make phone calls, knock on doors, do open houses, stuff like that. And I did that, and I was pretty successful. I was, like I said, about 20 years old. So it was really about my birthday. It was just about to turn 21. So I turned 21 in February. That year, I think I sold about 27, 28 houses. This year It was 2004. Very similar market to we're in right now. When I always kind of say we're a monkey with wings to sell real estate. It's like, you put a sign in the front lawn and the house sells in a week or two. Yep. So it was a very easy market, but it was a great market to learn in because it was just so much opportunity. Everybody was selling. And luckily, people weren't that picky, the realtor they would hire. So they would hire a 20-year-old kid to come and do this for them. And I was finding the business from doing open houses, knocking on doors. But 28 houses is a pretty good number. I was hustling.
Really good.
And back in the days, you might not remember this. You were how old in 2004?
3.
You were you were 3 years old. So we used to have carbon copies of everything. So like there was no computers basically. Yeah. People didn't have emails for the most part. I would buy people fax machines. So I could fax them listings that came on the market so they could get them. People that didn't have emails, some people did, but it was like 50-50, checking them, did they get them? So there's a lot of different things. I would try to do everything I possibly can, but I found out really quick there was only a limit how many houses I could sell by myself. 28, 29 was a lot of houses, especially without the use of computers. You'd have to bring 5 copies of a purchase sales agreement, run around, get them signed, things like that. Nowadays, just dot loop and you send it out. But it was a lot of manual driving around, and I would work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I wasn't married. I lived in my parents' apartment above their garage. I didn't have any overhead. And I was able to do that. I was selling 28, then about 50 houses the next year after that. And I was coming across a limit of like, I can't do this forever. And I really looked outside of the real estate industry for a better way of doing things. And I kind of looked at other industries and got an idea. And I found my mentor, Craig Proctor, up in Canada. And at the time, I was working at RE/MAX. He was number one in the world for RE/MAX. So obviously, I wanted to go meet him. To go meet him means you had to go to one of his seminars. And I went to a seminar, and I was like, wow, this is the guy I want to follow. And so I started following him in about 2005 when I went to his first seminar in Arizona. Went to that and really started learning a way of building real estate teams, because teams was the future, and we could see that. I looked at his team, how he was able to do, at that time, 500-600 transactions, and that was huge back in 2005. It's not that uncommon now. Still a lot of houses, but it's not that uncommon around the country to see teams do 500-600 transactions. But back then, nobody else was doing that. Nobody really had teams. He was really making that system then. So I really was able to kind of look into how he did things in the background of how his company ran. I started building my team that way. And, it started being very successful. We started running advertising, marketing to attract people to sell us. I was still doing all the selling, and I was what we call now inside sales. I was booking appointments for myself, going on them, running ads, banging a sign in the front lawn. So I started adding people to the team. The first person I hired was my wife. She was working for a law firm at the time, and she didn't like it. And we just worked out, hey, I need somebody to help out. And she came on. She did everything from putting the signs on. I'd go on the listing. She'd put the signs in the property, do pictures. And we started expanding slowly after that. And we hired our first agent, Max, and then hired our first inside sales agent. Now, what inside sales agent does is, they cultivate the leads, call the leads back, book the appointments. I was still doing inside sales for many, many years. And so, about 2008, we became the number one team in RE/MAX. We built a team, I think it was about 6 of us. We were selling probably 120, 130 houses. We were number one in the state for RE/MAX. Nice. Up there in the top for the state, for New England. 2009, still number one in the state. And we really started now using buyer agency, which is kind of new for a lot of agents to not learn about this at this time, but we used buyer agency at that time, where we would sit down with a buyer, go over what we could do for them, and we would sign a buyer's agreement with them saying, hey, listen, whatever property you buy, we get paid X% of that, whether it's on MLS or non-MLS. We'd go find you all those properties. And, we would negotiate too. Sometimes the agent wasn't paying out enough, and we would negotiate the fees with the buyer and the seller and the agent involved to get what we need to get. That was on our contract, and everybody would be happy. The buyer would get the house, the seller would get their house. So we decided to do that in 2008, because we'll talk about that a little later. And the story was, it just continued. We got bigger and bigger. 2011, still number one in the state, number one in RE/MAX. We just left RE/MAX, not for the point that RE/MAX was a bad company, but we just hit the point of it, just like I'm giving at that time. When you worked at RE/MAX, you paid to work at RE/MAX. RE/MAX was really in the business of renting space to agents, not really selling houses. And we would just pay, I think we were paying like $120,000 a year in rental space. We were like, I think I could just build my own office and save that money. And we were paying 5% per deal. And it was just, we outgrew the brand. And we left, I think we were doing about 180 transactions. We left that year, did 200 transactions, actually 199 transactions. That pissed me off too. It was like one short. Did 199 transactions, and then we just kept on growing the team. And more people came to me, and they would just be like, why doesn't everybody sell real estate this way? To the point, I think 2022, we sold 611 houses. And, the average agent on my team sells about 30 houses per year. And so what most agents say when they join us is like, hey, why doesn't everybody operate this way? Because it's a lot of work. Putting these things together, the systems, the processes, what works, what doesn't work. But we were always able to, what really gave us a cutting edge is seeing what's happening out there before most people would even see it's coming out there. What's really been a shame, Max, of the industry is the industry's really kind of... giving themselves away where there's little value that the brokerage offers to the agent, and in return now the agents just became basically a sea of people working there, and most agents sell 3-4 homes a year. I think that last time I looked, 90% of agents have sold less than 5 houses this year, and that was like in October, beginning of October. So all the way up to October, 91% I think it was sold less than 5 houses. So it was a profession that you would go work for a broker. The broker would teach you how to sell real estate, teach you ways to do real estate, give you business, give you tools. To basically, the franchises came in and really killed it because not killed it. It was just a different opportunity. But they basically say, hey, you can pay us, 15%. You can keep 85% of your commission. And you can come there and we'll just make a little piece, but we'll hire 2,000 of you guys, and we'll make a little piece off all 2,000, where most brokerages would be 20 agents, maybe 30 agents. 50 would be a huge brokerage. Now you got these brokerages like 300, 400, 500 agents working at the brokerage. They're just a number, a cog in the wheel as far as like, there's no training. There's, ideas that don't work as they tell them things from 15 years ago that don't work today of how to sell real estate. But it's really dumbed down the experience of real estate, is for the consumer. And that's really what's been a shame of the industry is the industry's really gone from being focused on the consumer to really being focused on the agents and trying to who can have the most agents and sell the most houses. It's not about the experience that the consumer gets. It's really just kind of burn them and churn them and how many agents can come work there. And I'm saying this it's not me saying this, the statistics back it up itself. 84% of agents will be out of business in the next 2 years. That's just the average. Most agents, when I say most, 99% of agents and brokers make under $100,000 a year. When you look at those numbers, you can say, well, that would say that the industry is not really doing that well. Repeat customers, 87% of customers say they would go back and do business with the agent. 84% of customers don't. Okay, so if you look at those numbers, I think those numbers really do a better job than I can of telling you that the industry is broken. And the biggest thing is the industry is broken because I believe it's broken because it's very self-serving. It makes its rules, it makes its regulations itself to benefit the agent, not to benefit the customer experience.
Where do you think that problem rose from? Do you think it was from the National Association of Realtors?
Yeah, and NAR was kind of, they've done a lot of good for the industry, but let's put it this way. In 1993, they came up with buyer agency and NAR. Before that, everybody represented the seller. The seller put their house in the market. They'd hire a professional. They'd pay him on that time 6% on average to sell the property. They'd bring an agent to do that. They had sub-agency at that time where they weren't buyers agents, they were sub-agents. So they'd represent the seller, right? So the buyers, they came up with the idea of saying, hey, let's have somebody represent the buyer, but the seller will pay them. And everybody thought that was crazy. 1993, they came up with it, NAR. They introduced buyer agency. Average commission at that time was 6%, okay? Fast forward, now just so you understand, too, back in 1993, you were just a twinkle in your parents' eyes.
I don't even know if I was that.
Your father was probably about 15 years old at the time. Anyway.
No, he was born in 1970, so he's 23.
All right, so he was 23 at the time.
Yeah.
At that time, to get information in your house for sale, you had to contact a realtor.
Yeah.
They had a book. All the properties were for sale in there. Only way you get information on houses for sale backs is you had to contact a realtor.
Right.
Also, what would happen now, the buyer agents, is agents, believe it or not, would steer their clients by who paid the best commission out there. Now, technically, they were representing the buyer, but the seller was paying them. It's a crazy idea if you just think about it for a minute. Like, would you go to court and pay the prosecutor and the defendant, and you had to go to court to be defended? Would you pay the prosecutor to prosecute you?
Right, but the reason I think buyer contracts help protect against that is because no matter what, the realtor will be getting paid the same amount. And that's something that they need to educate their buyers in a buyer consult, And so it kind of stops that from, this house, there is still the difference, if you're working on like a difference, like if somebody's offering 1%, and you have it matching up to 3%, then they have to pay the 2%. There is still that. But it's all like, and I feel like the whole reason, and we can give a little bit of context of what's going on in the real estate industry right now. There was a lawsuit out in the Midwest. I'm not like 1,000% sure where it rooted from, but basically sellers felt like the price of their home, the the cost to sell their home through a realtor was inflated because they had to compensate a buyer's agent, essentially.
Well, yeah, and I think most people kind of miss the point. Kind of go ahead a little bit. Let me finish then.
Yeah.
And bring the listeners to why this is happening. 'Cause most people are missing the point of why the lawsuit happened. So, as I was saying, is 90-something% of agents don't sign a buyer's agreement. They don't sign them. Mm-hmm. So they technically represent the buyer, but the buyer is not sure who they represent. Certainly that's today. Back then, nobody was signing buyer's agreements. Okay, but the buyer's agents did control what houses the buyers saw, because they literally, if you didn't pay out enough, they'd take that page and they'd just rip it out, and the buyer would never know the house was even for sale. 2006, Zillow came around. Okay, NAR got sued by Department of Justice because NAR didn't want to open up the data to the public. DOJ came out and said, you got to open up the data to the public. NAR rolled over, let the public have access to their MLS data. Zillow came around 2006, opened that up. It was, once again, an anti-competitive lawsuit. They said, hey, you're doing this so you can fix your prices. 2006, the average commission was 6%. Membership in NAR went from about 750,000 members in 1993 to about 1.2 million members in 2006. So they grew. They were doing really well, getting a lot of people that couldn't crack into getting listings to work with the buyers. Zillow came around. The whole idea would be now the public can get access to these listings themselves. So they get listings. They also had Zestimates. That was something new. Their buyer can now also, seller could find out what their house is worth without having to call a realtor. So now this took out the whole thing of I don't have to contact a realtor to find this information. It's open to the public. Okay, so now it's free access to information. Obviously, everybody thought prices of commissions would do what? Go down, right? Because just like the travel industry, just like flowers, everything got cheaper in the service industry because of the internet. Fast forward 2018, guess what the average commission still is? 6%. Okay, DOJ scratches its head and goes, why is this still happening? They sue NAR. They say, hey, you guys are doing anti-competitiveness. Stop telling buyers that it's free to use you guys, because it's not free to use an agent. It's built into the price of the house. The seller's paying that. So stop telling the agent.
Well, if you really want to get technical, the buyer's paying.
Yes. So it's not free, is it?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But for years, the training would be, it's free to use me. And that's all these men and women would run around saying they're, I'm the buyer. Hey, it's free to use me. So people say, hey, I'll use you. And so DOJ's like, no, maybe that's what's keeping the price high. Well, now you go to 2020, DOJ is suing NAR again. They reopen a lawsuit that was basically closed on the Trump administration, but they say, no, we want to reopen this. NAR is going nuts, saying you can't reopen it. At the same time, a lawsuit started in 2018, the Merle Sitzer lawsuit over in Missouri, basically a class action lawsuit. 2021, it got class action lawsuit authority, basically went through the court. They said, yep, this is a class action lawsuit, bring it through. And basically, the whole thing was about this, is all the agents were getting together. Oh, by the way, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, commissions are still average 6%. And so really what people are missing the whole point with, okay, is that they opened up RE/MAX, who settled the case for $55 million. They went to here, they opened up their training, and they saw them settle for $89 million. They went to KW, saw their training, and they said, you guys all tell your listing agents to say the same thing. If you don't pay out 2.5%, 3% to a buyer's agent, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, no one is going to show your house and your house won't sell. Now, if Keller Williams does that, RE/MAX does that, here does that, Berkshire Hathaway does that, all the large brokerages are doing that, that's collusion. Okay, you're keeping prices inflated by telling everybody basically a lie, and that's why commission rates aren't coming down, because just think about it. Before, you'd pay the buyer's agent 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever it is. They'd find the buyer, they'd work with the buyer, they'd find the buyer, bring them to the house. What changed in 2006, and even today, is the buyer's agent doesn't find the house anymore for the buyer. What does the buyer's agent do then? Like the buyer finds the house and then goes to the buyer agent and say, hey, I want to buy this house. What are they using the buyer agent for?
Basically the back end of the deal and to
represent them.
Exactly.
So they want representation.
Yes.
Right. So the seller's paying for
and negotiate for them.
Right.
But
so why should a seller pay a buyer?
It depends on the realtor. If you're a good realtor, you will send buyers houses before they get up out of bed in the morning.
Yes.
And you will text it to them and say, hey, this is what's new on the market. Here's what's going on. This is what's price reduction. This is what's going on. It all depends on how good of a realtor you are and if you offer a good value proposition. You know what I mean?
It does. So what I'm getting to the point is what's happening most of the time is the buyer is finding the house for the agent. They're using the agent for, as we agree, representation. So the sellers are saying, why am I paying this person for 3% or 2%, whatever the number is they're paying MLS, to basically represent the buyer? By law, they have to come in here and try to nickel and dime me and beat me over the head. And you guys keep on telling me if I don't pay these people, my house isn't going to sell. And then every company I speak to says the same thing. That's what this whole lawsuit's about. And that's why in 2.3 hours, a jury of 12 found unanimously them guilty and awarded $5.36 billion in charges. And 20 minutes after that, every other lawyer started lawsuits around the country to go this. So if you look at it, most agents keep on looking at it. So I don't understand the seller pays a commission, the buyer pays a commission. That's not the point. It's the training that they found to sit there and saying is from the beginning, commissions have never gone anywhere. They still remain this way. And they found out they're remaining this high because every brokerage is training every agent, and you were probably trained the same way I was, to tell them this: if you don't want to pay a co-broker, pay less. Well, if I don't pay a co-broker enough, no one's going to look at the house. Now, as you know, we don't pay anything out to co-brokes. We don't pay anything to co-brokes because fundamentally we just find it not ethical to do such a thing. And all our houses still sell. I sell more houses than anybody else in the state of Rhode Island, and our houses sell for more money than anybody else in the state of Rhode Island. So if I could tell you the proof of we do it ourselves every single day, and we sell more houses for more money, that's an absolute lie what they've been telling. And that is why they're guilty.
So how do you do business differently than other brokerages? Break it down. Like if somebody comes to you and says, I'm Max, Nathan, I'd like you to sell my house for me.
So what we do is we have buyers that contact our office daily. On average, you'll get anywhere between 600 to 800 buyers contacting us. We take a catalog of what those buyers are looking for in a house. And when I come out and list your property, I just bring those buyers with offers to your property. And I'm like, Max, your house is worth $600. I have this buyer that's willing to give you $600,000. This one's willing to give you $590, and this one will give you $600,000 for the house. This is when they want to close, and the sale's already done. Which offer would you like to take? Now, what happens when you go on most listing appointments? What most agents do? They talk about listing the property. They talk about putting signs on the property. They talk about trying to go find a buyer, putting it into MLS and trying to market it. MLS is not the best way you need to sell a house. In fact, it's probably the last thing you should do is put into MLS. I know that's very different than what most agents are taught, okay, by, once again, NAR, okay, who was once again just found guilty for fraud, okay. Just think about the idea of when you put a house in MLS, Max, right? And I don't mean to really kind of shock you because I'm listening. It's like it's a paradigm shift, but I can tell you the shit that you've been told for the last 15, 20 years in this business is just BS. It's just to make NAR better. The 2003, their biggest year, I think it had 1.6 or 1.7 million members. They're getting all these members. 2 years, they're out of business. They pay your dues. It's just a pyramid scheme. They're just trying to get all these people in. They know they're going to fail in 2 years to get out. Everybody put your listings in. Let's just look at NAR's policy and MLS's policy. You get a listing. Okay, what's the first thing you do? You run and put it in the computer and give it to them, right? But before you can do that, there can be no branding on that listing whatsoever, so the public would know who really has this listing. Because as MLS, what we're going to do is we're going to put this out through Internet Data Exchange, and we're going to confuse the public, so the public really doesn't know who the listing agent is. We know that the seller's paying this you probably $20,000, $30,000 to represent you. But we're going to put it in MLS, and we're going to take all your branding off it so it doesn't say anything about Nathan Clarke or Max, whoever the listing agent is, and we're going to send it out to a bunch of flunky real estate agents from around the country and around the state who maybe work full-time, who maybe don't. And then the buyer is going to get really confused and search the address, and all these other companies are going to come up, and whatever one they click on, they'll call, and that agent is going to be the one that's going to sell the property. And that agent's going to act like the listing agent when they talk to the buyer. They've never seen the house. They've never stepped foot into it. Hopefully they do a good job. We don't know. That's how MLS works. It's your whole idea is it's smoke and mirrors when you put into MLS. Is like, why don't they want to know who's in there, right? Why don't they put that stuff in there as far as who's the listing agent? It's because they want to try to, not for the better of the consumer experience, because that's a shitty consumer experience, right? Like the consumer's like, they call on Zillow. They think they're talking to the listing agent. But these other agents buy these leads for $200-$300 from Zillow that MLS sold to the Zillow. We don't make any money, right? You go spend how much time and effort to go get a listing?
Yep.
You spend, let's say, $2,000 to get a listing, right? You advertise the hours, you go get that listing, you come back, you put it into MLS. MLS goes, Max, take your name off anywhere on here, and we're going to sell it to Zillow for maybe $50, whatever they sell it to Zillow for. Do you get any of that money? Nope. And then they now put it on Zillow. The leads don't call you. They call your competitor, and you got to pay your competitor 3% for them to bring that lead back in there.
Yeah, well, I think
That's the system.
So let's come to it from one person or one brokerage helps the whole transaction with selling a house. They bring the buyers and they list the house. So do you really have the buyer's best interest in mind?
Do I have them? Is that you asking me
right,
a question?
Right, because you're selling the house. Obviously, the more you sell the house, the higher
so
commission.
as representing the seller.
Right, because if you bring buyers in, are you really technically representing them to the best of your ability?
Yeah, but I could flip the table and sit there and saying, are you technically representing, I'm this listing agent, you're the buyer. You're technically representing the buyer, but I'm paying you $10,000. You get paid more the higher the sale price is. Yes, there's a piece of paper saying you represent them. Man, I've been in this business quite a while.
Yep.
The stuff I see coming over from buyers agents, they're more excited just to get the deal done than they ever are about the buyer's well-being.
Right.
And especially, what's the last 3 years of selling? Really, where's the representation? It's sitting there going like, hey, all right, this house is in the market for $600, Max. You're the buyer, I'm the agent. You need to offer $700 if you want this house.
That's how it's been. I remember one of the first buyers I had, we put a bid in on a house, $30,000 over ask, and we lost by another $30,000. And it's like, how am I supposed to and I explain that to I use buyer contracts, and I explain that to every single one of my buyers is that we're in a market where we basically have zero leverage. And it's sad. So you're in kind of a conundrum with them.
It ain't going anywhere, Max.
Yeah.
It's not going to change.
The market's shifting now. Houses are sitting longer. So
but are more houses coming on the market or less?
More.
You're seeing more houses, but are more houses selling or less houses selling?
Less houses are selling.
Less people are selling their houses on MLS. There's more houses that sell off MLS than on MLS.
I believe it.
Right. More people don't put their houses on MLS and they sell. You see them be pulled up with the paper. You can pull them up. More houses sell not on MLS than on MLS. The idea is what I'm trying to say. Is like I understand this is radical things, but we put all this hope in NAR and MLS as like the great savior that done thing. And dude, they are just trying to make money. They make money off of membership. They do not set up rules that benefit. How does it benefit the client, right? For example, you ask things that I do that are different to sell a property. So you buy any one of my properties. We do a home inspection before you buy the property, and we'll give you access to that home inspection. We'll also give your buyer, whether they use me or go use you, Max, to buy the property, we'll give a buyer a 1% buy down rate. We'll also guarantee that any house that they buy off of us, if they're not happy, we'll buy it back or sell it for free for the next 24 months. Did you know that?
I did know that.
Why did you know that? Because you did your homework before.
Well, and because it's on a lot of your commercials.
Right. But MLS doesn't allow me to put that on MLS?
I did not know that.
You know why?
Why?
Because it's a differentiator.
Yep.
And they don't want you to be different than anybody else out there. Because if you're different, then it doesn't serve them. But don't you think your customer would want to know they get a 1% buy down rate if they buy this house versus all their other choices?
So let's say, I know this is rare, but let's say you don't sell a house and you have to buy it because that's what you do. What are you offering? If somebody's house is worth $500,000, what are you offering them to buy it?
Well, we're kind of jumping from one subject to the next, and I'll answer that. But back to the question of we're kind of on the subject of MLS being in the best interest of the customer, NAR. Why is it in the best interest of the NAR and MLS not to let the buyer see that? Why isn't it in the best interest of the buyer or the seller to let the buyer or seller who know who the listing agent is of the property? I mean, they do, but where do they put it?
Right.
And the disclosure in the bottom, a little mice type.
They're limiting competition.
And that's what they would sue. We got a bingo.
And listen, I'm going to tell you this right now. As a new realtor, having to pay realtor dues sucked. I sat down and I asked myself, what do they do for me? You know what I mean? Other than free coffee and free lunch for CE classes.
It's not free, man. You're paying.
It's not free. I'm paying for it.
And you're paying for the classes.
And nobody's been able to give me a straight answer for it.
Let me ask you this.
And
let me ask you this though, Max.
But this isn't something just from this conversation. This is something that I've been thinking about ever since I got my license.
Let me ask you this. If you didn't have to be an NAR member to be part of MLS and get access to MLS, would you still be an NAR member?
No. But I would be a RIAR member. I would be
Okay.
I would be a local member because I'd like to support local commerce and things like that.
But I'm telling you,
Yes.
so just back up the words.
Yep.
You said, what was it, anti-what?
Well,
So
it's almost anti-capitalist, but
well, it's anti-competitiveness. How many times?
Anti-competitive,
How many times since 2006 has NAR been sued by Department of Justice for anti-competitiveness?
I don't know, but I know you know.
4 times.
There you
They
go.
are extremely anti-competitiveness. I laugh. John is a great guy over at MLS, but I call him Comrade John because I get in trouble all the time when we put houses at MLS and we try to make it different. I get a call from our president, and John says, "You can't put that in MLS because it's different. We want you to be like every other comrade that's in MLS. We don't want you to be different. We want you to be the same. Do you know why? Because we want your dues."
So
John doesn't say that, but that's what they want.
so how are you bettering the market to help customers, help clients, help people?
Yes, so that is
wanna-
what we are focused on.
Yes.
We believe, as I said in the beginning, the real estate industry is broken. We see it as self-serving. We see the rules that they make are not to benefit the customer, but to benefit the agent so they can attract more agents into the business and collect dues off the agents. It's self-serving, right? Their rules, we just went over a couple of them. I can go over even more if you'd like. Okay, that'll just...
I got time.
Yeah. So the point is we're focused on the customer experience, and that's what we focus on. What do sellers want? They want a buyer. And what do buyers want? Houses, right? Nowhere in does anybody say I want an agent. Okay, so
Yeah.
the sellers want houses. The sellers want a buyer, and the buyers want houses. So we have lots of houses for the buyers to buy, and we have lots of buyers for the sellers. And we simply put those together. So we make it a very easy experience, and that's what people want. People want an easy experience where it's good customer service. 1 out of 4 houses last year were sold to an iBuyer or investor, an institution. 1 out of 4, that's a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
People are going more the way of what's that, DoorDash? When you
Yeah.
go get like,
Yeah.
so do you use DoorDash? I've never used DoorDash.
I used to, but then I realized this is stupid expensive, and I'm never gonna.
So,
$30
for
for friggin' lunch.
$30 for a sandwich you could drive $10 for, but there
Yeah.
are people that'll sell their house for 70 cents on the value just to make it easy because they don't want to go through the trouble of doing it. See, that's the biggest issue. And someone's really going to figure this out in the future is they're just going to make it a button you push and your house is sold.
So in the current industry in 2023, November 2023, what are you hoping, the industry comes out at the end of all this, when this is all figured out? How are you hoping the industry operates in terms of
All right, so
a
where's
realtor
this going
selling
from
a
here?
house?
Where's this going from here, Max?
Yes.
I'll just speed the whole conversation up. You're either going to work for a super successful real estate team or you're going to build your own super successful real estate team. And that'll be it because there's a huge compression on real estate commissions coming very quickly. I mean, within the next 12 months, you're going to see a huge compression of that. I think Zillow CEO, it was the CEO of the president, predicts about 80% of agents will be out of the business. They're not sure how they're going to pivot. Remember, they charge their agents 40% commission to work with the buyer leads that they get, or they charge the agent thousands of dollars a month to get these leads. Well, how's that conversation going to go with that buyer when they call and they go, "Hey, yeah, are you the listing agent for 123 Main Street?" No, I'm not the listing agent. I have to disclose that to you, and I need to charge you $15,000 to go see this house. Click. That's how that conversation is going to go. So Zillow doesn't know how they're going to pivot with this because all these companies just make money off the back of realtors doing all the work. This stuff has to end. It has to be a clear, transparent business. And NARs, basically, I think what's going to happen is DOJ is going to come in and say NAR and MLS is decouple. Do not require people to be part of MLS and a realtor.
Hey there, listeners. Thanks for stopping by to the podcast today. Please, before you're done listening to this episode, leave us a review. If you're on Spotify, you can review now, and you can also review on Apple Podcasts. But if there's any platforms that I'm forgetting about and you can leave us a review, please do so. If you're happening to watch us on YouTube, and if you don't know, you can watch these podcasts on YouTube now, please like and subscribe to the channel and share the episode as well. So thanks for stopping by, everybody, and enjoy the episode.
You're going to make 2 different price plans. People could just pay to play. People pay a yearly fee, or you can put out NAR, which you want. NAR might not make it out of this lawsuit. It's a $5 billion lawsuit, and they have multiple ones coming up after this in other states. NAR doesn't have $5 billion. NAR is $250 million in their coffers right now. So they got a lot of assets they're going to sell. KW is worth about 1.6, 1.7 billion. The other ones, everybody's far less than that. So this is one lawsuit, and they're all involved in multiple ones coming. So you could see all these companies go belly up. If 80% of agents wash out of the business, these models that work with basically a mass pyramid scheme of 80% of you going to fail, 80% of you sell 2 or 3 houses a year. We know in 2 years you're out, but we just get some money out of those 2 or 3, and it's a burn them and churn them idea. That's not going to work anymore for those companies. And I'm not picking on any of those companies, but that has been the problem. Instead of bringing people in, teaching them how to sell real estate the right way and be customer pointed and being the purpose is the customer, this whole industry started really pivoting with buyer agency in 1993 to just let's open up the floodgates, get all these agents in here, and it's just, we know 2 years are out, 2 years you're out, burn them and churn them. Who makes the most money? NAR, okay, anybody that collects dues, stuff like that. So where's that going to end? Well, if 80% agents or 20% agents that survive, they're going to be well-trained machines of selling real estate, and people are going to, the compression in real estate is going to cause that commissions will be 2-3% to sell a house, just like it's in Europe. Just so the listeners know, America is the only place that charges a buyer agency, makes a seller pay a buyer agency. There's nowhere else in the world that's done that way. That was something that was uniquely invented by entrepreneurship of NAR to make money. And where it's evolved to is it's going to go right back to what it was before. It'd be small. It'd be a brokerage of 1,000 agents, 500 agents, 100 agents. I don't know. And I think it'll be more like 100 agents at a brokerage, and there'll be 2,000-3,000 transactions that brokerage handles. And it'll be a system. This is what happens. And people have dozens of systems that they could use. And eventually it'll be, you'll be competing with large corporations that'll come up. The more that we just make this system that everybody does the same thing, like I get listing, I put it into MLS, bang, sign a front lawn, take pictures, it's a very duplicatable. It becomes a commodity at that point. And when it becomes a commodity, a computer could do it. And then you have companies like Zillow come in. Those are one reason why Zillow hasn't gotten to the real estate industry is because agents are paying 40% referrals to them to do deals. They're sitting there saying the brokerage gets paid 15%, the agent gets paid after they know the brokerage 35%, and we get paid 40%. We're making the lion's share. We're not even selling real estate. We're taking no risk. We don't have a real estate license. We don't have E&O. We just sit here and send leads. We're good at this deal right here. 40%.
Right, because they were exploring,
they're sitting there going, why?
Yeah.
Look what a brokerage makes. Brokerage nets less than 7% on a deal. Like they're making nothing. What do they tell you? 99% if brokers make less than $100,000 a year. Most brokers own a brokerage. It pays for the bills of running the brokerage, and then they can go sell real estate and basically keep 100% of it. That's the ideal model most brokers have out there. So it's very ripe for change, and it'll be someone will figure it out. But Max, what I was saying in the beginning is this is going to 3 ways for most people. You're either going to work for a super successful real estate team, you're going to build a super successful real estate team, or you're going out of business because it's not. The compression is going to just kill everybody.
So how do agents make money being on teams like yours or other teams with similar models?
The agents in my team make way more money than agents by themselves. My agents are on the top 5% in the state for number of homes sold. All my agents make a 6-figure income. I got agents that make $300,000 a year of net income, and they don't, and that's net income. That's a misnomer because most agents get into the business and they just see these high splits. And
is that salaried or commission?
Commission.
Okay.
No, we all sell. We're all in the business of selling real estate, but like I said, most agents get in the business and they're just focused on what's a split. The split's a split. Where really what happens after a couple of years, most agents scratch their head and go, I need to talk to more people. I don't have enough business. I need more business to make a living. And when you have somebody like a team that absorbs a lot of the business out there, it gets very hard to compete. And there's only so many buyers that you can work with that you're related to. So then you need to find a way to market, attract clients to come work with you. And that's a whole different animal of trying to find business. Buying internet leads is a thing of the past. It's just not profitable. There's too many people going after. It's too expensive. Yeah. People don't answer their phones.
Yeah.
Right? So that means you need to stop playing with the big boys and start advertising radio, television, billboards, spending millions of dollars a year marketing. And that's where I'm saying, as far as you're just seeing a gap get bigger and bigger between agents and teams are taking a bigger piece of the pie. But I'm not just saying any team. I'm saying a super successful real estate team. So what's a super successful real estate team? Well, a team that has its own marketing system, not buying leads, and a system of selling real estate, a system of double ending all their houses they put on the market, and having a predictable way of making money with a positive cash flow, no matter what the market's doing. Like these markets that we're entering in, I get super excited because I do better in these markets than I do in a regular market where everybody gets into the business. Because 2008 to 2012, we grew the most. You know, we went from selling 150 houses to over 200 something houses very quickly because people get picky when they want to sell their house. They want to work with somebody that they know that's been doing it for a while. That's not just, you know, when I first got in the business, I was able to do friends, family. They knew I was getting into the business. They were like, all right, we can give you a shot. Plus, I had the wind at my back. The market was great, you know, but when the market tough, now they're like, hey, man, this is my biggest asset. I need to sell this with somebody I could trust. And so by that time, we were building a reputation, being very aggressive, marketing properties, getting houses sold. And, you know, that's in these type of markets that people start pulling towards us. That they're looking for somebody that has a name recognition. And I don't mean this to sound like I'm braggadocio. I'm just trying to show is like there's a better way to sell real estate than what we've all been trained to sell real estate as. It's almost like stormtroopers out there. It's like just how much people are just tied to like, no, you can't do it any other way but this. And it's like there's a much better way. You're just like this dark side of just listening to these companies like NAR. If you look at the inside of that company, they're going through all this sexual harassment lawsuits. The president's left, CEOs left, vice president's out. I mean, it doesn't sound like it has that great a culture to me. But if you just look at what they do in return, I asked you the same question. If you didn't have to be part of them, be part of MLS, would you be? You said no. And I guarantee you 90-something% of people in Rhode Island feel the same way. So it can't really be that good of a, it sounds more like it's like blackmail.
Right. And, you know, I think that competition is so important to any industry, right? Because not only does it, I mean, well, the biggest thing is it drives people to be better. They have to be better than their competitors, right? So I think from that standpoint, you're absolutely right where, you know, having more people to then weed out the bad ones is a system that sort of needs to come into place. And you're definitely seeing it now, you know, markets shifting, like I said earlier. Houses are sitting, so the people that know what they're doing and want to be successful will stay successful. You know what I mean? And the people that were just running their businesses off of family and referrals.
But that's how most people are. I mean,
yeah.
You know, Cutco Knives, not a bad company.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, Cutco, yeah.
Who do they hire?
Kids.
How long do they last?
I don't know.
It's about the same long as about realtors.
Yeah.
You know, that's how the model is set up. It's just this model has to change. We don't want to keep on. You said it. You said we need to get more people in there, Max. Yes, we do, but we don't need the same minds. If you keep on just putting people in the same easy bake oven of, all right, you got a real estate license, you did 45 hours of continuing ed, congratulations. And they come out and they all do the same thing. They go, I put houses in MLS. You pay me 3%. And then you sit there and go like, and there's 10,000 of them in the state of Rhode Island. There's only about 15,000 sides. You got 10,000 agents.
Yeah.
Why would you know how many hours you got to be in for? I don't want to say continued ed, but be a hairdresser. You know how many hours you have to do before you get a license?
Am I wrong to say it's hundreds? Like
500.
Yeah. Like okay.
How many hours is it to be a realtor?
What was it? 45. Yeah.
And so it's like jump over a wet log, Max, and you could be a realtor. And I'm just saying, just look at all these things and say, why do they make it so easy? Why do they make it so low? Why don't they make it tougher?
The cost of entry is low, but you still have to have an entrepreneurial mindset, because if you don't and you just go into real estate thinking you're going to get a paycheck every 2 weeks, you're wrong. You know, you still need to work hard. You still need to go into it. You need to make the calls. You need to meet people. You need to go to events. And people just aren't ready to do that and aren't willing to do that. And in a market where it's tougher to get listings, that's when people leave.
Right. Do you think numbers like 51% of agents don't even sell a house every year? Do you think that's an entrepreneurial mindset right there?
No, it's people coming into it thinking that it was going to be easy, and it's not.
76% of agents sell between 0 and 4 homes per year. Mm-hmm. You know, 90% of agents as of October sold less than 5 houses. That means the average agent is making like $30,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm glad to hear I'm in the top 10%.
Yeah, so you're sitting there going like, why do we need more people coming in this industry? So what's happening is there's always been about 15, 16,000 houses that have sold every year in the state of Rhode Island, but you keep on adding more and more agents that are basically nibbling at the crust, and but you do that like termites. They eat the whole thing. You sit there and going, and the consumers come back and they have a terrible experience. We just shot some numbers over, or 84% don't go back and use the same agent again. Why are these numbers? That's why. Obviously, they're not having a great experience if they're not going back. And
then why do 84% say they would?
87% say they would. 84% never do.
Yeah.
So 84% never end up using the same agent to buy and sell real estate. If it's such a good industry, then why are people not making money and getting out in 2 years? Right? I would sit there and say, let's put it this way, Max. If it was you're an entrepreneur, I could tell you're a hardworking man. You gave me a call. You have a lot of grit to do that. Would you buy a franchise tomorrow that they told you have a 90% chance of failing in the next 2 to 5 years?
That's business.
Is it? But would you buy that? Why would you buy that franchise then?
I mean, if you're just going off of, it depends on what the upside is.
Right.
There's so many more aspects than just one.
You could
statistic.
make $1 billion.
Absolutely. Then I'd be like, it depends on what the cost of entry is too.
Right. Well, let's go back to why the bar is so low. Okay, so high to get into real estate. It's just obviously they just want as many people as they can get in.
Right.
If they really cared about the customer, there would be a lot more trading that they would require an agent to do.
Right.
This is their
NAR should have regulated it.
They did. They did.
But they don't do a good job of it. Like
What side were they on? What side were they on?
Well, they don't teach you how to sell a house in a real estate class.
They don't want to.
No. I left real estate class and I'm like, how do I fill out a purchase and sales agreement?
I heard as of last 2 years, one of the newer agents we hired, they told us when they were in class that NAR was telling them not to sign buyer's agreements because back in 1996, there was someone that signed a buyer's agreement with an agent in Arizona. And they didn't show them a for sale by owner that was for sale down the street, and they got sued because they didn't show them all the houses. And there was an updated kitchen in that house. And I was told that same story back in 2003 when I got my license.
I can't tell you. I don't remember. It's been over a year now, but I wouldn't be surprised if they had told us that. But you're absolutely right. The training needs to be better. This is a total failure. It's not you. I guess you could point the finger at NAR, but.
Well, who made the rules so light? It wasn't the state that came out and said, we want 45 hours. The state was like $500 for a hairdresser. This is someone's largest purchase they're ever going to make in their life. We should probably make it at least 1,000 hours. Nope. Why are the appraisals not getting in trouble with this? Because the appraisers require how many years you got to be basically under a different licensee before you can do that. That would be the right way to do it. That's if you're going to be a plumber. And let's say the plumber starting wage is $60,000 a year, you got to be an apprenticeship with another plumber before you can get you free. Why wouldn't you do that? Because NAR has the largest membership in the world for any membership out there. They own a lot of politicians. Every time these things would get pushed down, they would just come and say, no, and they'd pay off whoever they pay, okay, and they'd keep these rules and this bar the way it is to be able to let all these people come and flood the industry. Did that benefit the industry or did that benefit NAR? Where does the money go? These guys are making how many billions of dollars a year of memberships?
Yeah.
I've never needed NAR, and NAR doesn't need me.
So NAR doesn't exist. What happens?
I think that's where you're going towards. I think you just look at the numbers. NAR doesn't have billions of dollars to settle this lawsuit, so I don't know how they're going to do it.
So what happens to the industry if NAR doesn't exist?
There'll never be a vacuum. Somebody else will step up and make a better thing without them in the way, because they've been in the way of the industry progressing because they've held it the way they've done as long as they can.
So do you think there'll be...
Just time out. Do you know of any other organizations that's been sued 4 times for anti-competitive acts by the Department of Justice still in business?
No, but do you think that it'll be a privatized MLS system where it'll be like how they have? I heard there was a company in Seattle where it's just a separate company where you can list the houses on there, and it's basically a subscription service, but it's different from, it's not NAR.
You'll probably see Zillow step up.
Yeah.
Zillow will probably be, that's the first one I can think of, but somebody else will come out. There's this whole battle for data. Zillow might come out and say, hey, it's X amount of dollars to enter your listings into our portal. We'll put it out there. They might do it for free. I don't know. Someone is going to step up at this opportunity out there, and I think that's where I'm going back to the teams, is most people don't realize there's no money in a 2% commission. There's no money for you. There's no money. That's what the average agent is getting on a buyer side now is 2%. There's no money in it for anybody, and most people use this as something to subsidize their income to be able to to make it worth their time, but they do another job and they do this. That stuff's done. That those people are out of business, and it's either work for a super successful real estate team or build your own. And what I mean by that is because there's no way you're going to be able to do 1,000 transactions by an agent yourself and make 2-3% a deal. It just won't be. You won't be able to keep up. So the technology will come up that it'll be able to handle more of that stuff. But the team will focus on customer service, communicating, bringing things together. You might see attorneys come into the game. The buyers will say, I think why that's going to happen too, if you look at the future, is like, I think it was the 80s. NAR was sued again for basically saying, you guys need to make it more negotiable, your commissions, and let everybody know it's negotiable for a seller. That's not built in stone at 6%. You need to come out. So they came up with rules like you can't pre-print a commission, a listing agreement. You can't do all these things. And then the public got wise and realized everybody doesn't have to pay 6%. The idea was to bring it down so they'd have low commission brokerages and there'd be different options. It never really took off. Lo and behold, they found out why. And the reason they want to keep on doing these things is to allow more competition. So they got to get rid of NAR to stop making it anti-competitive so these things happen. But you'll see going forward why that's going to happen also with buyer's agencies. Buyer agency is the same thing. When buyers start realizing that buyer agency fees negotiable, like you say you sign a contract. I don't know what you put in there. Let's say you put 2 apples in there, right? We won't say commissions, right? Whatever. Someone will sit there and say, well, maybe if I have to pay this, like if I have to go buy a $500,000 house and pay $10,000 to use an agent, and it's negotiable. Well, I want to see what you have for $10,000, and I want to see what Nathan has for his, and I want to see what I want to shop around, just like listing, so people selling their house do.
Right.
I want to see what they get for their money.
Right.
That's what makes a free enterprise system that we live in.
Right.
So that's why they had to stop saying it was free. Now they're going to basically DOJ is going to say you will no longer allow buyers agents to be paid by a seller or an agent to sell their property. It's illegal, right? So now the only way you're going to make money is you got to charge the buyer. The buyer is going to decide. Probably half of them will say, "I'm just going directly to the listing agent, and I'll hire an attorney to look over stuff for me." The other half will say, "No, I don't have time for that crap. I'm going to hire someone to represent me." But they're going to look around, they're going to sit there and say, okay, what's your credentials to do this? So you'll have a team that said, okay, we've done this 50,000 times. I've done this over 4,000 times for my clients, pretty well versed. And then the person that's like, well, I've done this my second deal. That person's just not going to exist because no one's going to hire that person because they sit there and say, you work part-time. If I'm going to pay someone, I want a full-time person.
Right.
You wouldn't go hire a part-time lawyer. You're not going to hire a part-time. That's just like firms. Like lawyers go work at big firms. Big firms it'll be big teams, and they'll go work at those teams to build up or build their own team. And that's the thing that people have to do. Most people just are going to be late for the show of sitting there going, "Hey, I don't have $1 million to play with a year to build an asset, to build a marketable program, build a system that has its own way of generating business without paying for internet leads, all those things." So. That's where, in a nutshell, things are going to go. Buyers will be negotiating their commissions, and that's what DOJ wants. And what DOJ wants, DOJ gets every single time.
Yeah, well, I just like to jump back to your guaranteed home sold, essentially. And if you don't sell your home, we'll buy it. Can you explain that process and how you go from, okay, God forbid the house doesn't sell, what the price you offer your sellers are?
Right. So you say, like, we put a house in the market, the house doesn't sell.
Right.
So we sit down with you, we come across a price and a time of possession. So if the house doesn't sell, let's say in 4 months, 120 days, whatever the time is, we're closing on the 120th day. So, obviously it depends on what house we're looking at, what the price range is of the house it is. There's so many variables. It's like, hey, what's the percentage that we buy houses for? Typically, we're buying anywhere between 85 and 95% of the value. It depends on.
Okay, I mean that's fair. I mean,
it depends on what.
You can't buy it for what it's worth,
Well, you can. The problem is if it's not selling, it's not worth that price.
Right.
Right. And so it's a situation. So we'd sit down. Let's say you had a $400,000 house. We'd say, okay, $450. If it doesn't sell for $450, we'll buy it for $450. So we put it on the market for $500. It doesn't sell, $450 we'll give you for the house. realize that's a pretty good deal for most sellers. Is they would sit there and go, "Well, geez, after I pay commission, I'm set with $465, $470 in my pocket, $465."
And is this after usually like buyer consults or seller consults? Like, listen, like the house isn't selling. We need to do a price reduction and things like that, or do you just keep it the same price? Do you guys do price reductions?
No, we'll do price reductions in the property.
Okay.
Basically, what we could do is if we can't get them an offer for it. But the issue is like I've had to buy 2 houses, and we're not buying the houses. We know what the house is worth. It's not my first time to the rodeo, and I'm like, I don't know what this house is worth when we're going to buy it. It's like, I've done this 4,000 times. It's like we know what the house is worth,
right?
But why people like that? It's an assurance that the house is going to sell,
right?
Like it's not a guessing game. So we like I said, we're totally different when we sit down with sellers. We're bringing them offers on the house before we even list the house, because we already have buyers.
So obviously, you have very strong opinions about what's going on right now.
No, I just like to say
no. Well, I would just I'd like to talk about your progression with this opinion and sort of when you started to realize, hey, this is maybe how the industry should work.
No, I would just like to say I was right for
Okay.
the last 13
Well,
years with it. And for all the realtors that busted my chops the last 13 years while we were getting paid more than them, and they were jealous about it and fought us the whole entire time, and I tried to tell them this is going to happen, I was right.
Well, can you explain sort of when you started practicing this way, your company, and what was the final straw to where you did it?
No, we started doing it actually totally. It was nothing against NER and stuff like that. It was just we were running a business. And there's no business in the world that will ever sit down and not know what they're going to get paid at the end of a job, right?
Right.
Like, all right, let's put it this way. How most agents do business, and I know you sign buyer's agent agreement, but, dude, nobody signs buyer agent agreements. They just say they do. And definitely 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, nobody did.
Yeah.
But we see them come in all the time because we ask them, because we don't pay a buyer agency commission. We ask them, do you have a buyer agency agreement? And they're like, yes. And we ask them, well, what's their agreed price to pay you? Oh, I didn't put that on the agreement. Well, you don't have an agreement then. Okay. So what made us do this before is because what most agents do is they just show them houses that are on MLS. When we work with our buyers, we show them houses that are not on MLS. We show them houses that aren't offering anything, off-market properties, expired properties, for sale by owners.
So how do you make
pocket
money
listings we do
that?
Because we sign an agreement with them. We say, hey, I'll show you every single house. Some of these houses are going to be worth 90% of the market value. They just want to sell. Would you like to see some of those? But we got to just agree upon ahead of time.
Do you usually do a flat fee or commission?
A commission.
Okay.
It's always been a commission.
Yep.
We get paid 3 times in the transaction. We get paid a retainer also from our buyers. Our buyers and sellers pay us a retainer.
Okay.
Right? Before we do business. Because, listen, here's how most agents do business is they don't tell the buyer what they can do, what they can't do, who represents who, how they get paid, what their whole job is. And most buyers show up to the close and go, how do you get paid? I've had it happen. So I know that. And that's how most agents operate. How we operate is we sit down with the buyer before we show them any houses. We tell them what we can do, what we can't do legally, and how we operate and how we can operate, and what our fee is to do those things, and the things that we can get them. What do you think is a better way of doing business?
Being open and honest.
It's not that you have to be honest. That's how any business would. You go meet with a lawyer, and the lawyer wouldn't sit down with you and tell you in the first 10 minutes, this is my hourly rate.
Right.
We do the same thing. We say, this is what we can do, what we can't do. But that's revolutionary in the industry. Remember, in 2018, or was it 2020, they got sued. NER had to sue to say, stop saying it's free to use an agent. Because what was every agent doing? Oh, it's just free to use me. And the consumers are confused, and they would just say, oh, it's free to use them. I guess we'll use them. But if they really knew they were paying, they would have a totally different way of shopping around with it. So now everybody's like, hey, we're going to sign buyer's agreements. Great. That's not going to solve the problem.
No.
The biggest problem is what?
You need to have a value proposition of why somebody's going to work with you.
Okay, that's also great. You have that position once you come in there. We could talk about that.
Yep.
But how are you going to get the people to call you?
Yeah.
That's the big question. That's the $1 million question is saying, how are you going to get people to call you above all the other choices they have, including not calling you or doing nothing at all? So why are they going to call you? And nobody seems to answer that question. Yes. You sit there and go, this is why it's going to have to come down to value propositions to use one brokerage over the other. All the brokerages are faced on, come work here. We won't take that much money from you, and you keep the lion's share, and we won't really do anything for you, but we'll have some classes for you. And it's just been a run to the bottom. As you got now companies, it's like 95% you keep, 5% we'll keep.
Yeah.
It's a rush. Would you go to a restaurant that does that?
Yeah.
You know,
No.
so they don't have it. The brokerages don't have any value to
Yeah.
attract business, but they're not in the business of attracting sellers. Keller Williams, they're not in the business of attracting sellers or buyers. They do no marketing for sellers or buyers. They do marketing just to attract agents. So agents come work with them, and they continue the pyramid of come work here. You know, you cap out at 15,000, 17,000, whatever it is. You bring some buddies on with you, and we'll do this little pyramid thing with them, and multi-level marketing. That's every single company out there. But you see, they're not in the business of selling real estate. Things are going to switch very quickly. Now the brokerage is going to have to be in the business of selling real estate, which means attracting buyers and sellers to use their industries, which is a totally different game. It's a very expensive game. That's why they don't want to play in that. They'd rather just attract agents and do that. So I'm just saying the whole industry is about to be flipped upside down.
Right. But do you remember like originally like when you decided this is what I'm going to do, and was there like a flipping
2008.
point? Yeah.
2008, because it wasn't a position of like, we need to know when we were going into transactions what we were going to pay. We couldn't be like subject to whatever the guy in MLS or gal in MLS wants to pay out.
Right.
Right. We were seeing a compression happening. Plus, we were selling more and more houses off MLS. And so we wanted to be able to make sure we could be paid for them.
Right.
That was a simple fact. I said this before, is like, you know, try to operate different than anybody else out there. Like if you do 99% of people made this much money, and the people that made most of the money didn't operate like the 99%, you'd operate very different. Then you got to look at a line, draw a line, and go, this is what most realtors do in real estate, and do the opposite. You'll make a lot more money. And that's just simply what I did. And so I just sat there and said, I'm going to set my fee. I'm going to make value. I'm going to be able to demonstrate that value and then collect that fee.
Right.
And I made a system for you to do that. Since 2008, that we've no doubt been more successful than anybody in the state using buyer agency agreement for that long, thousands of times, because we have something so badly that the buyers are willing to pay us for it, that they're willing not only just pay us a premium and pay us a retainer up front to do that. I would say, yeah, we've been pretty good at it for a pretty long time.
Great. Well, I've had an absolutely amazing conversation with you, and I know you're a very busy guy, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I'll tell you what, I'm going to post this online, and a lot of my colleagues aren't going to like that. But I believe
they don't want to hear the truth.
I believe in a free speech. I believe in free speech. I think that's very important, and I believe in capitalism, and I believe in competition, and I believe that if something doesn't work, it'll get weeded out pretty quickly. So it's quite interesting to see all your success, and congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
But the last question I ask every single one of my guests is quite a simple one, but it's very interesting to hear everybody's take on it. And if you were to leave one piece of advice to the listeners, could be about business, life, anything you want it to be, what would that piece of advice be?
Operate different.
Okay.
Operate different. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Yeah. I mean,
for those of you watching right above Nathan, we believe in challenging the status quo.
Yeah, don't just be another the same old thing, man. You got to shake things up and be a game changer, and a differentiator. A lot of names for it, but just don't be like everybody else, and you'll be successful. That's the problem. Most people are just like everybody else, and they make what everybody else makes. Right.
I couldn't agree with that more. Yes, thank you very much for coming on. I've had a great conversation with you, and thank you all for listening to the Knowledge is Power podcast, and I will catch you on the next